Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're traveling back to a dark and stormy day in 1346, a day that would forever change the face of warfare and signal the bloody end of an entire era. This is the story of the Battle of Crécy. Picture this, it's August 26th. The sky over northern France is churning with storm clouds. Thunder cracks over the muddy fields near the small village of Crécy. On one side, a magnificent force of 30,000 French soldiers stands ready. You have knights, nobles, and professional crossbowmen, their banners and armor gleaming under flashes of lightning. They are the pride of Europe, the pinnacle of medieval military might. Across the ridge, a much smaller, weary force waits. Just 9,000 Englishmen, exhausted after weeks of marching through enemy territory, far from home. By all accounts, this should have been a massacre. A swift, decisive French victory was all but guaranteed. But what unfolded on that muddy slope would bring the age of knights, honor, and chivalry to its knees, all at the hands of common peasants, armed with simple wooden bows. Our story begins with King Edward III of England. He had invaded France, sparking what would become known as the 100 Years' War. But his army was small, severely outnumbered, and trapped deep in hostile lands. A direct open battle on flat ground would have been suicide. So Edward, a brilliant tactician, chose his ground with extreme care. He found a sloping hill near Crécy and ordered his men to dig in. They dug ditches and planted sharpened stakes, preparing to hold their position no matter what came at them. He placed his most experienced knights and men-at-arms, all veterans of many wars, at the top of the hill. But his true ace in the hole, his secret weapon, was positioned on the flanks of his army. Thousands of English and Welsh longbowmen. These weren't just any archers. They wielded 6-foot bows carved from yew, weapons so powerful that years of training with them would literally leave permanent grooves and deformities in the skeletons of the men who used them. In the hands of these highly trained yeomen, these bows could punch through plate armor from hundreds of yards away. By late afternoon, the massive French army finally arrived. They were hungry, their columns were disorganized from the march, and they were all soaked to the bone by the relentless rain. Any sensible commander would have made camp and waited for the morning. But the French king, Philip VI, was consumed by pride and eager for a glorious victory. He refused to wait. He ordered an immediate headlong assault. Leading the charge were 6,000 Genoese crossbowmen, some of the best-paid mercenaries in Europe. They began their slow advance through the thick, sucking mud. But there was a critical problem. The torrential downpour had soaked their bowstrings, making them slack and robbing their bolts of power. As they got into range and fired, their shots fell harmlessly short of the English lines. And then, the English responded. Suddenly, a sound like a clap of thunder echoed across the field. Thousands of longbows unleashed a terrifying storm of arrows. It was a storm that didn't stop. Every few seconds, another dense cloud of arrows hissed through the rain, striking with devastating force. The Genoese, caught in this lethal downpour, broke and tried to retreat, but the French knights behind them, enraged by what they saw as cowardice, charged forward, trampling their own mercenary allies in their fury. The most powerful army in Christendom had just turned on itself. Then came the main event. The French knights, the very definition of chivalry, with their gleaming armor and fluttering banners, thundered up the muddy slope. They believed in honor, in glorious single combat, in the right of nobles to rule the battlefield. But the longbows didn't care about titles or lineage. An unrelenting blizzard of arrows fell upon them. The air was filled with the shriek of steel-tipped bodkin points piercing plate armor, the screams of dying men, and the awful sound of thousands of pounds of horse and rider crashing to the ground. The English arrows stopped entire lines of charging knights before they even got close. The muddy hill descended into pure chaos. Men were slipping and falling, and dying horses created a nightmarish, tangled barricade. Each time the French tried to regroup and charge again, the disciplined English archers answered with another perfectly timed volley. By the third charge, the slope was so thickly piled with the bodies of men and animals that it was almost impossible to advance. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a methodical, one-sided slaughter, driven by the stubborn pride of the French nobility. Amidst this chaos, One of the most poignant stories of the day unfolded. The blind King John of Bohemia, hearing the sounds of battle, was determined not to miss the fight. He ordered his knights to tie their horses' reins to his own, and together they charged blindly forward, shouting their battle cry as they rode straight into the arrow storm. When the fighting finally ended, their bodies were found still tied together, a final, tragic symbol of feudal loyalty and the utter futility of the knightly ideal in this new age of warfare. Even the English, their enemies, were said to have wept at the sight of his bravery. By nightfall, the once invincible French army was completely broken. Over 1,500 nobles and knights, the flower of French chivalry, lay dead in the mud. Countless thousands more had fled or were captured, and the English losses, they were shockingly light. By some estimates, as few as 40 men. Crécy wasn't just a military victory. It was the death of an idea. For centuries, Europe had operated on the belief that power came from noble blood, that the heavily armored knight on his war horse was the ultimate weapon, an invincible force. But on that hill, the longbow proved that discipline, training, and technology could shatter that belief. The age of chivalry died at Crécy. A new, more brutal kind of warfare was born. The longbow became the symbol of England's military dominance for the next century. It was simple, relatively inexpensive to make, and in the right hands unbelievably deadly. It gave common men the power to kill a lord from 200 yards away, a power once reserved for the elite. From Crécy to Poitiers, and later to the legendary field of Agincourt, the longbow would decide the outcome of Europe's greatest battles. The rules of war had been rewritten. Today, the fields of Crécy are quiet and peaceful. There are no banners, no armor, no cries of battle, just the silent earth, holding the memory of how quickly an entire world can be upended. In a single afternoon, the mightiest warriors in Europe fell to the skill of humble archers. It's a powerful reminder that no power, no matter how great, lasts forever, and that sometimes the course of history is turned not by the grand ambitions of kings, but by the steady aim of the very people history often forgets. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.